Ferrari's championship hopes are bleeding away on every straight this season. Their SF-26 carries an estimated 30 horsepower deficit against Mercedes. This gap is the direct consequence of a strategic turbocharger bet. That design choice backfired when new FIA regulations erased its advantage. Team principal Fred Vasseur has confirmed this deficit exists on record. The Scuderia now fights a war against rival engineering and past decisions. Circuits like Monza and Spa demand top speed for survival. Lewis Hamilton expected to challenge for titles in his second year. Instead, he battles a power unit that sacrifices peak output. The intended benefit no longer applies under current pre-start procedures. A major tension remains unresolved in the paddock right now. We know the deficit exists and why it happened. The real question involves Ferrari's aggressive two-phase ADUO recovery program. Can it deliver the promised 30 horsepower combined gain? The championship math could become insurmountable before fixes arrive. The redesigned ADUO 2 turbocharger targets that crucial power restoration. It is only expected to debut at Monza later this year. Those gains have not yet been verified on track. The team attempts mid-season surgery on a compromised power unit architecture. They must also maintain chassis development momentum simultaneously. Both drivers need confidence in a radically inconsistent package. Fred Vasseur addressed the situation with remarkable public bluntness. He stated via Planet F1 that the straight-line deficit is known. He admitted the team must work on it as it stands. He offered no specific horsepower figure to the media. No timeline for resolution was provided in that statement. There was no guarantee that planned upgrades would close the gap. That silence reveals the uncertainty gripping the Maranello factory. The root cause traces back to one specific design decision. Engineers chose a smaller turbocharger for the new power unit. They prioritized reduced throttle lag off the start line. Peak top-end power was sacrificed for that responsiveness. This gamble made sense under previous standing start dynamics. Then, the FIA introduced the new 5-second pre-start procedure. It fundamentally changed how power units behave during race starts. The smaller turbo's intended advantage was completely eliminated. The performance cost remained without any offsetting benefit. Motor Biscuit describes this as a strategic bet that backfired. No Ferrari official has used that exact language publicly. The smaller turbo still spins inside every SF-26 today. It continues limiting peak output at critical moments. The team is now forced into emergency development mode. Rivals exploit this gap every single race weekend. So where does that leave the championship picture today? The technical reality behind that deficit is far more specific than general engine weakness. Ferrari engineers made a deliberate sizing choice during the initial 2026 power unit design phase. They selected a physically smaller turbocharger for the combustion side. The goal was reducing rotational inertia to cut throttle lag. Faster response off the line was the priority over peak horsepower. This philosophy aligned perfectly with historical standing start data. Launch performance dictated early race positioning in previous eras. Then, the regulatory landscape shifted beneath their feet. The FIA mandated a new 5-second pre-start procedure for this season. That rule change altered the thermodynamic state at launch. Turbos now reach optimal operating temperature before lights out. The cold start responsiveness advantage became irrelevant instantly. Smaller turbo. Wrong era. Costly mistake. Ferrari was left with a component optimized for a problem that no longer existed. The straight-line penalty remained baked into the hardware architecture. Peak mass flow rates are physically limited by compressor size. You cannot simply turn up boost pressure to compensate. Higher pressures risk exceeding material stress limits. Combustion temperatures climb beyond safe operational windows. The result is mandatory derating to protect reliability. Mercedes took a fundamentally different architectural path for 2026. Their larger turbo sacrifices some low-end response for top-end power. Under the new pre-start protocol, that trade-off favors them entirely. Lewis Hamilton articulated this disparity clearly via Planet F1. He noted that Mercedes takes a huge step on the straights. He pointed out rivals having a little bit more deployment. He highlighted less derating at the end of the straights. That last point about derating is where the true damage manifests. The 2026 power unit splits output roughly evenly between combustion and electric energy. Raw horsepower numbers only tell half the story. Energy management strategy determines actual straight-line speed. A smaller turbo forces earlier electrical harvesting. The battery drains faster, sustaining boost pressure. By the final third of long straights, the system cuts power. Drivers feel the car go flat while rivals surge past. This is not a driver error or setup compromise. It is a fundamental hardware limitation playing out every lap. Scuderia fans, Com estimates the gap at 30 horsepower versus Mercedes specifically. Remember, that figure comes from paddock analysis rather than official telemetry. Fred Vasseur confirmed the deficit exists without validating exact numbers, but the on-track evidence speaks louder than any press release. GPS traces show consistent speed deltas in DRS zones. Overtaking becomes exponentially harder when you lack terminal velocity. Defending positions requires perfect corner exit every single time. One minor mistake erases all chassis advantages instantly. So what does this mean for Ferrari's immediate competitive ceiling? The team understood the problem early enough to mount a response. They did not accept the deficit as permanent. Instead, they launched an emergency two-phase development program called ADUO. Phase 1 deployed ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix. ADUO 1 combined software mapping changes with a newly developed shell fuel compound. Reports indicate it delivered an estimated 7 to 8 horsepower gain. That was a meaningful but incomplete fix. The core architectural constraint remained unaddressed. Phase 2 represents the true hardware intervention. ADUO 2 features a completely redesigned turbocharger assembly. New blade angles optimize airflow characteristics for current regulations. Revised blade count balances efficiency across the rev range. Advanced materials handle higher combustion temperatures safely. The combined target for both phases is roughly 30 horsepower. That would theoretically erase the entire Mercedes advantage. But here is the critical uncertainty hanging over Maranello right now. ADUO 2 has not yet been verified under race conditions. Its Monza debut remains expected rather than confirmed. Engineering targets do not always translate to track performance. Manufacturing tolerances can introduce unexpected variables. Integration with existing systems requires extensive validation. The team is racing against both rivals and development timelines simultaneously. Picture this for a second. You're leading a team with decades of racing heritage and immense pressure from fans who demand victory every single weekend. Your engineers have identified a fundamental hardware flaw that cannot be fixed overnight. The media wants precise answers about when performance will return. Sponsors need reassurance that their investment remains competitive. Yet your only option is to stand before cameras and acknowledge the problem without offering any concrete timeline or technical solution. That is the exact position Fred Vasseur found himself in regarding the SF-26 power unit. His public statement via Planet F1 was remarkably candid, yet deliberately vague. He confirmed the straight-line deficit exists on record. He admitted the team must work to address it. But then he added the phrase, "It is like it is." Those 5 words carry enormous weight in Formula One communication. They signal acceptance of an unchangeable reality rather than denial or deflection. No specific horsepower figure accompanied that admission. No development milestone was promised to journalists. No guarantee of parity with Mercedes emerged from that exchange. Vasseur's restraint reflects genuine engineering uncertainty rather than political messaging. The ADUO 2 turbocharger redesign targets 30 combined horsepower when paired with Phase 1 upgrades. However, those gains remain theoretical until validated under race conditions. Manufacturing complex turbine components introduces variable tolerances. Integration testing requires thousands of simulated kilometers before track deployment. Monza's high-speed demands make it the logical debut venue. But expecting a fix and delivering verified performance are vastly different milestones. The gap between projected and actual output could determine championship fate. Rivals continue exploiting Ferrari's weakness every session. Points lost during this development window never return. Vasseur understands that overpromising risks destroying internal credibility. His team needs honest assessment more than optimistic projections right now. Drivers require accurate data to adjust their approach accordingly. Engineers depend on realistic targets to prioritize resources effectively. Public relations teams need authentic narratives to maintain fan trust. That phrase also reveals how deeply the smaller turbo decision permeates current operations. Every strategic discussion begins with acknowledging this constraint. Qualifying setups compromise top speed for corner stability. Race strategies account for reduced overtaking potential. Tire management adapts to longer defensive stints. Fuel loads factor in extra consumption from higher boost pressures. Even simulator correlation efforts must compensate for known discrepancies. The deficit is not merely a number on a dyno sheet. It shapes every operational decision made trackside and at Maranello. Vasseur's acceptance does not indicate resignation. It demonstrates mature leadership during a crisis requiring patience. The team continues pushing ADUO development aggressively behind closed doors. Shell's fuel partnership remains active in seeking chemical solutions. Aerodynamicists explore drag reduction to offset power losses. Chassis development maintains focus on maximizing mechanical grip. Multiple recovery streams operate simultaneously despite the acknowledged limitation. So where does that leave Ferrari's competitive outlook today? The answer depends entirely on execution speed versus rival exploitation rates. Mercedes showed no signs of slowing their own development trajectory. McLaren and Red Bull continue refining packages around superior baseline power. Ferrari's chassis strength provides temporary mitigation on technical circuits, but power-sensitive venues expose the vulnerability ruthlessly. Albert Park and Silverstone punished the deficit severely earlier this season. Spa-Francorchamps looms as another potential pain point before Monza arrives. Each race weekend represents both opportunity and risk. Strong results build momentum toward the upgrade debut. Poor performances widen the championship gap beyond recovery. Vasseur's measured tone suggests he understands these stakes completely. His refusal to speculate protects the team from external pressure cycles. Internal focus remains fixed on solving the root cause systematically. External communication prioritizes transparency over false optimism. This balance defines Ferrari's current survival strategy amid adversity. Go back to that opening line about the SF-26 carrying an estimated 30 horsepower deficit against Mercedes because a strategic turbocharger bet backfired. That specific number is no longer just a measure of failure, but now the precise target for Ferrari's most critical engineering rescue mission of the 2026 season. The team structured their response as two distinct sequential phases under the ADUO program rather than a single upgrade package. Phase 1 arrived ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix with tangible results. ADUO 1 combined revised engine mapping with a newly developed shell fuel compound to extract additional energy from combustion. Paddock estimates credit this step with delivering 7 to 8 horsepower. That gain provided immediate relief on medium-speed circuits where deployment efficiency matters more than peak output. It also validated the collaboration between Maranello engineers and Shell chemists under extreme time pressure. But everyone inside Ferrari knew Phase 1 was merely a stopgap measure. The fundamental architectural constraint remained untouched by fuel chemistry alone. Phase 2 represents the true hardware intervention required to close the gap permanently. ADUO 2 introduces a completely redesigned turbocharger assembly built specifically for current regulatory demands. New blade angles optimize airflow characteristics across the entire operating range. Revised blade count balances efficiency against rotational inertia requirements. Advanced materials withstand higher combustion temperatures without compromising reliability. This component directly addresses the root cause identified in our opening assessment. The combined target for both ADUO phases totals roughly 30 horsepower. Achieving that figure would theoretically erase the entire Mercedes advantage on paper. However, expecting delivery and verifying performance remain separate challenges entirely. Monza's unique characteristics make it the logical debut venue for this upgraded hardware. The Temple of Speed demands maximum top-end power above all else. Success there would validate months of emergency development work.